Full free press. Exclusive interview. Tensions are high strung across the land as the infamous Ponyville Theater fire, now already 2 weeks old, continues to beg the question: is Equestrian Guard really capable of keeping up with the demands of our rapidly changing society? The Full Free Press was able to score an exclusive interview with the esteemed Sherlock Holmes, professor in criminology, to talk about the issue. His answer? A resounding no. Full Free Press, hereafter abbreviated as FFP. So, Mr. Hooves, you are the founder of the scientific discipline known as criminology. Would you briefly explain what this field of study is all about for the benefit of our readers? Sherlock Hooves, hereafter abbreviated as SH. Absolutely. Criminology is very much in its infancy. My aim, and the aim of every criminologist, is to eventually devise a number of diverse methods and strategies that can help solve crimes and criminal cases more efficiently. For instance, we still know very little about the differences between pony-made and natural fires, or how weather conditions affect the rate at which our bodies decay. We've started discovering distinct patterns here and there, but we are nowhere near formulating conclusive hypotheses yet. That's why I found the study of criminology within the Canterlot Academy to help speed up this process. FFP. Sounds fascinating. But is such knowledge really of much practical use? Not many crimes are committed, and can't a variety of spells do exactly what you described? SH. Those are both fairly common misconceptions. Yes, crime rates are very low, but I am convinced that this is an illusion generated by our inability to separate crimes from accidents. If we got better at that, I'm sure many more events, formerly presumed to be accidents, would suddenly be exposed as criminal offenses. On the topic of magic, it does exist, but its usage is more limited than we have been often led to believe. Take the fire that occurred 2 weeks ago, for instance. Unicorn investigators arrived on the scene, but couldn't uncover anything worth mentioning. Why? Because the copious amounts of magical energy released by Miss Sparkle during her, well, intentioned, yet misguided, attempt to douse the flames completely threw their readings off. Not to mention how spells like that are generally becoming less if the crime has been committed more than a day or two prior to their casting. I'm well convinced we've found better leads, if only our grasps of criminology would have been more developed. FFP. So, do you think the fire was lit by some pony then? SH. I'm saying we can't confirm or dismiss that claim with our current understanding. We actually have a sizable list of possible suspects, if you think about it. There's the teacher, who was the only one to make it out alive. The unicorn, who just happened to level the entire building in the effort to help, and even the others. However, we both lack proof and motive. I'm not trying to cast blame on two very likely innocent ponies. I'm merely trying to point out that our lack of knowledge severely hampers our judgment. The Equestrian Guard isn't equipped to handle crime scenes like this, and they do more harm than good when they try, honestly. That is why my colleagues and I hope one day to set up an organization, either inside or alongside the Guard, in order to facilitate collaboration on tough cases like this. FFP. One last question. Despite your good intentions, many oppose your ideas. Why do you think this is? SH. For the same misguided reasons you brought up earlier. They believe our work is superfluous and unnecessary, or a waste of taxpayer bits. We'll prove them wrong, in time. FFP. Well, that's all the questions we had for you today. On behalf of the Full Free Press, I'd like to thank you for this interview. SH. It was my pleasure. Twist slowly put the newspaper down on the desk in front of her, staring aimlessly off into the distance. Even though it had happened over 2 weeks ago, she found it hard to take her mind off of it, to forget it. It seemed like everywhere she looked around her, Things remained from the fire, and of her friends it had taken from her. Images of Apple Bloom, in particular, haunted her waking thoughts and her every dream. They hadn't been at the same class anymore, but Apple Bloom had hung around with Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo more and more. True, but deep inside, she had never stopped thinking of her as anything less than her best friend. And now, she was gone. Other fillies started entering the classroom for the first lesson of the day, and their cheerful voices pulled Twist from her melancholy and solitary thoughts. The two fillies, Noon Harp and Rain Dancer, currently her closest two best friends, walked right over to her and snuck a peek at the newspaper in front of her. "Huh? They're still reporting on this crap?" Rain Dancer asked. "I know nothing exciting ever happens around here, but it's been 2 weeks." Noon Harp shot her an indignant glance behind Twist's back. "How can you be so insensitive, Rain? Can't you see Twist is still down in the dumps about all this?" Rain Dancer's blue cheeks suddenly flushed a deep shade of purple. "Oh, my bad, Twist," she said rather awkwardly. "But hey, cheer up. We got a new teacher to look forward, at least." Twist looked at the two of them for the first time. One of her eyebrows raised. "New teacher? What do you mean?" "Oh, didn't you hear?" Miss Rain Dancer said. "Miss Bluebottom's husband had an accident back in Trottingham this week. She booked a ticket out of here as soon as she heard the news. Or so they say." "Huh?" Twist mumbled. "So, who's going to teach us now?" "Oh, well, I have some theories on that," Noon Harp said quickly. "If you ask me, the likely candidate by far is—" "Please take your seats, children," an eerily familiar voice interrupted. As her two friends sped off to their respective seats, Twist turned her head back towards the front of the classroom slowly, an unimplicable feeling of dread slowly coming over her. As she had expected, the pony standing in front of the class was none other than Cheerilee, apparently back from 2 weeks of much-needed rest and relaxation. Twist swallowed. Surely the board couldn't have. "Now, as most of you know, Miss Bluebottom has had to leave us due to a very urgent matter that required her presence," Cheerilee said in her usual pleasant voice. "That's why they asked me to come and teach in her place instead. Now, I know some of you from previous years, but most of you I'm seeing for the first time. Let's all do our best to get along, shall we?" Cheerilee beamed her friendly smile across the room, and as Twist looked around, she realized Cheerilee was getting mostly enthusiasm and smiling faces back in return. Yet she herself was mortified. That's the teacher who was the only one to make it out alive. The sentence from the newspaper article struck her like a meteor, sending ripples of panic coursing through her entire body. Nothing had been proven, of course, and nobody except for ponies like hooves seemed to pay any heed to the thought. Yet there was still a small chance that her friend's killer was right here in front of her in the classroom. And she was there to stay, to boot. "Twist, is everything all right?" Cheerilee asked with a concerned look. It was only then that Twist realized she had been pressing down on her desk hard enough to nearly topple the entire thing over, and her eyes were virtually popping out of their sockets. She looked up at her new teacher and smiled the biggest smile she could muster. "Oh, yeah, everything's fine, just fine. No problem here." Cheerilee lifted an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Well, if you suddenly start feeling dizzy, be sure to tell me, and we can take you to the nurse. All right?" Twist swallowed and nodded slowly. The rest of the morning passed by quite uneventful for the most of the class, but for Twist it was an absolute nightmare. Cheerilee's presence served as a constant reminder of her lost friends, and on top of that, images of the cackling Cheerilee running around with a lit torch racked her nerves. Even during recess, she barely spoke a word, oblivious to the hushed whispers and glances of the other fillies shot in her direction. By the time afternoon rolled around, Twist knew she wouldn't be able to keep it up for very long. She'd turn into a nervous wreck if she had to go through all this every single day for the rest of the year, or, even worse, every day for several years to come. Deep down inside, she realized she was being silly. Cheerilee had always been nice and kind to her, and any proof that she'd done anything to the fire existed slowly in Twist's own head. On top of that, Twist had become aware of a previous subconscious desire that was actually stronger than her fear. She wanted to understand what had happened, to know what her friends' final moments had been like. Class ended, and every pony slowly made their way out of the classroom, chattering cheerfully amongst themselves. Twist swallowed and mustered her courage, standing up from behind her desk and approaching Cheerilee, who was still busy cleaning the blackboard. Miss Cheerilee?" she said shakily. Cheerilee put down the blackboard cleaner and turned around, smiling encouragingly at the filly. "Yes, Twist? Is there something I can help you with?" Twist stuttered for a moment. She knew there was nothing to be afraid of, yet her knees shook as if she was about to enter a lion's cave. "Well, you see, I was wondering if you could tell me something about how Apple Bloom died." "Oh, Twist," Cheerilee said compassionately. "I had a feeling that's what had been bothering you all day. No need to lie. I could tell. I know it must have been hard on you. It's been hard on me too. But the truth is, there's nothing I can tell you. My memories of that day are so hazy, and the smoke cloud in my mind, you see. Then there was the flood. I just can't remember." Twist hung her head in disappointment. "So, you weren't there when they died?" "No, I was elsewhere in the complex. You need to let it go, Twist. Give the wounds time to heal." "But no buts, young lady. Bygones should be bygones. I just want to—" Cheerilee abruptly turned back to the blackboard, effectively cutting off Twist's train of thought. "Let it go," she said coldly. The sudden change in tone caught Twist off guard, and she involuntarily stumbled a step backwards. She had expected a certain amount of compassion, and had feared anger or open hostility, but nothing had prepared her for the complete lack of emotion in those last few words. This wasn't any side of Cheerilee she had ever seen, nor any she had ever expected to see. As Cheerilee picked up the blackboard cleaner again, Twist hesitantly took a step towards the door, and then another, before sprinting out of the classroom altogether. She wasn't sure what she had wanted to gain from initiating that conversation, and she wasn't sure if it had gone good or bad either. All she knew was that crumpled feeling still hadn't left her stomach, and that Cheerilee had somehow felt off during the latter part of that conversation. She had read that no evidence of malicious intent had been found, but that didn't mean there wasn't any, right? At the very least, seeing it for herself would surely put a mind at ease, and then she could finally leave all this insanity behind her and live on in peace. Well, unless she really did find something, but surely that wouldn't happen. Just a few more hours, and she'd once again have nothing in the world to worry about. It didn't take Twist long to reach the remnants of the theater building, and she looked out over the mess of splintered wood, theater seats, and random debris melancholily. The fire and the flood had rendered most objects damaged beyond all hope of recognition, and the pile of debris hid many sharp edges and other dangerous objects from view. Twist found it slightly questionable that the going investigations had managed to delay the cleanup for so long, but at the same time she was thankful for the opportunity. She didn't think they'd leave it like this much longer. She threw her gaze over to the vast expanse of wooden junk, and then went to work with a sigh. She tiptoed around the edge of the ruined building at first, hesitant to venture in between the debris and the many dangers it concealed. But soon, she realized she didn't have much of a choice. Even then, she progressed only slowly, searching every nook and cranny, testing every plank, before committing her weight to it. An hour passed, and still she had found nothing of interest. Doubt started to form in the back of her mind, and her lonely investigation felt increasingly pointless as the seconds ticked by. "It's no use," she mumbled to herself. "Ponies much better than myself have already looked everywhere." And that much she knew to be true. She'd seen the investigators roam these ruins as much as a week after the incidents, and they had seemed like they knew what they were doing. When she thought about how much force had been put behind the flood Twilight crashed into the theater, she couldn't feel surprised that no pony had been able to find anything. After all, the wave must have made it all the way to Whitetail Woods. Anything with that kind of strength behind it would surely... And that's when a thought suddenly hit her. Many ponies had looked in and around the disaster area, that is true. But how many had actually followed the path of the water all the way to the end? A sudden rush of excitement filled her body and swept away the tendrils of despair that had been slowly taking hold of her. She made it out from between the debris in a third of the time it had taken her to get in, making it out unscathed, as if though some kind of miracle. The immediate path of the water wasn't hard to follow, at least not initially. All she had to do was follow the trail of broken wood, which was easy as pie. She stopped to inspect particularly large pieces of debris several times, but they never had any significance. That was to be expected, as some of the investigators had surely gone this way as well. They'd have picked up on anything out of the ordinary. No, Twist wasn't out to beat them through intelligence, but rather through perseverance. The trail of wood slowly became increasingly hard to follow. While at first there had been new pieces to run towards in sight, the previous one, the distance between them had gradually increased, until they were lying several minutes apart. By the time Twist approached the forest, she hadn't seen any signs left behind of the water for at least 10 minutes. Any investigator smart enough to come this way would have probably given up by now, but Twist pressed on. Partially because of her stubbornness, but partially because she still hadn't put her mind at ease. Only when she was absolutely certain could she finally turn her back. She walked into the forest, and her patience was finally rewarded. There, lying between a few trees, was a particularly large piece of wood, not entirely unlike the others she had found. From the looks of it, it had once been part of the floorboards that made up the stage. What grabbed Twist's attention, however, was the presence of what appeared to be blood splattered all over it. She let out a loud shriek, and almost stumbled, momentarily taken back by what she had discovered. She was supposed to find nothing, so she could go home relieved. She wasn't supposed to discover, well, whatever this was. Of course, some pony could just have accidentally dropped a bucket of red paint, and it didn't have to be blood. And even if it was, the fire could have just brought down the ceiling upon some pony, right? That didn't prove anything at all. But it didn't look like a spill of red paint. The shape was far too irregular. On top of that, Twist had never subscribed to the notion of coincidence. She had always been more of a fate and destiny kind. Destined love, foretold happiness, and all the good stuff. But now, destiny had apparently seen fit to deliver possible criminal evidence into her hooves. Possible evidence. She wasn't sure, and she didn't dare kick up a fuss over what could be a mundane spillage of some innocent red substance or the other. In truth, she just didn't know enough about the blood, or its properties, to make a call. But Twilight might. She knew a lot about everything, right? It was certainly worth a shot. The unicorn, who just happened to level the entire building in an effort to help. She hadn't forgotten the article. That had also implicated Twilight, but she just couldn't bring herself to believe that she was involved. There wasn't really a rational explanation as to why she trusted Twilight, but not Cheerilee. It just felt natural that way. She had seen Twilight several times since the fire, and her behavior hadn't seemed out of the ordinary. She couldn't say she felt the same about Miss Cheerilee, even though no pony else seemed to notice. She looked at the bloodified floorboards and made her decision. They looked quite heavy, and she couldn't drag them through town anyway, so she'd just have to bring Twilight here instead. Committing the location to memory, she took off in the direction she had come from, blissfully unaware of a distant pair of green eyes watching her every move.